Hello, Simon, Drew, and Hylian.
Hello. Yeah.
Hello, Jakob. Well, hello, everybody. Welcome. Just before we start, Eleni, are we recording? It's all good? Okay, good. So, welcome to the second to last panel of our workshop series, Commodities in History, Theoretical Reflections and Empirical Case Studies. Let me remind you that today's event is being recorded. It will be made available online within the next few days. Also, let me remind you that this initiative is part of a project funded by the Greek Foundation for Research and Innovation under the second call for the support of postdoctoral research projects. So today we have Semih Gökatalay and Katerina Bregianni, who appears with my name, Juan Carmona Zabala, but that's a technical detail. That's her, who will be presenting on two different aspects of the broader story of regulating and promoting commodities in the interwar period, and including the interwar crisis in Southeastern Europe. Semih will be presenting on oranges in early Republican Turkey, and I must say that I was very surprised because I often think of fresh produce as a story that is that becomes relevant in the 50s, 60s with the generalization of refrigeration and electrification and so on, but he has a story to tell us about this very relevant commodity already in the interwar period in Turkey. And Katerina Bregianni will be telling us about the interwar crisis in Greece and what that meant for the purposes of the agricultural sector, and specifically two important commodities, tobacco and wheat in Greece. So let me introduce Semih Gökatalay. He's a doctoral student at the University of California, San Diego, where he's working on his dissertation with professors Hassan Kayali and Michael Provence and others. He has a master's in Middle Eastern Studies and a master's in economics, as well as a bachelor's in economics from the Middle East Technical University in Ankara. So he's between economics and history. And he has a number of articles on Ottoman history and on early Republican Turkish history. Often it has to do with economic historical issues, his publications. So, Semih, go ahead, and the floor is yours.
Thank you so much for the introduction, man, and thank you for organizing this workshop series. Let's say I'm going to share my screen and start my presentation.
Semih, sorry to interrupt. Can you speak louder, or maybe turn up your microphone?
If I speak now, you can hear. Is it okay, or is
it's better now? It's good. Thank you.
Thank you for the warning. And hello everyone, my presentation today explores the development of the orange growing industry in early Republican Turkey from a socioeconomic perspective by explicating people in the myriad aspects of the production and consumption of this commodity. Although orange remained an important commodity in the 1920s, the Turkish government and private entrepreneurs took steps to cultivate orange and become an orange exporting country in the 1930s. It searched for ways to increase the quality of oranges and introduced the trees of coastal Palestine with productive results. Various parts of Turkey produced tons of oranges soon, and orange became one of the symbols of these policies as governmental authorities and businessmen promoted it as a national export commodity. They waged a nationwide campaign to encourage both the production and consumption of oranges, especially during the week of domestic goods, in which Turkish commodities were advertised in the press, schools, mosques, and other public places or spaces, and the 1930s especially saw the nationalization of this product, orange, in the public imagination of Turks. To this day, orange has been perceived as a national commodity in Turkey. This presentation focuses on the social history of orange growing and a broader understanding of the complex interconnections between producers, sellers, and consumers across space and time. It argues that although orange was propagated as a commodity of all citizens, regardless of their social class, a historical study of orange reveals the class differences in relation to the social effects of the orange growing industry. And the details surrounding the production, promotion, and consumption of orange provide unique insights into the broader concept or broader framework in which socioeconomic changes took place during the transition to capitalism. Despite the growth of orange production and social conditions that could have potentially facilitated democratization, orange demonstrated class antagonism in Turkish society from the first stage of production to the last stage of consumption. Widespread appreciation for orange in present Turkey arrived with the Republican era. The Kemalists, the ruling cadre of the period, attached importance to the capitalization of agriculture. As a commodity that could take root easily in different provinces, orange emerged as a popular commodity on the government's agenda. Most of the orange production centers of the Ottoman Empire were not part of the country, were not part of Turkey after 1923, which made Turkey an importer of oranges from surrounding countries. Accordingly, the Turkish government introduced new laws to open up possibilities for growing oranges where it used to be marginal, and expand the area devoted to oranges and encourage investment in orange production. The 1930s brought real changes in orange growing. The production process was stimulated by the encouragement of the government because it advocated the expansion of orange growing. The map demonstrates where Turkish farmers grew oranges most. There were climatic limits to the locations where orange growing could be practiced. Oranges were commonly grown in southern and southwestern Anatolia. Growing conditions for orange trees were so limiting that most provinces did not have significant amounts of trees in the rest of the country except for Rize or number 7 on the map. Only Dörtyol, number 1 on the map, had a large-scale orange tree plantation before the Republic, while orange was a minor garden crop in the rest of the country. Farmers in other areas started growing oranges commercially due to government-led initiatives. For example, local officials built orange orchards in Antalya. When orange growing was successful in Rize, number 7, the governor of Muğla, number 4, spearheaded the transfer of orange saplings from Rize to Muğla to have better results in orange growing. As the government encouraged the production of oranges through various channels, it sought the transfer of knowledge from other countries, exemplified by mandatory Palestine. The citrus industry began to develop in modern-day Israel in the 19th century. Particularly Jaffa occupied a central place in the history of this commodity. Oranges from this province found customers elsewhere in the empire and in foreign markets. During the British rule in the country, Zionist colonization gave impetus to orange production, and orange became a national symbol of the issue. As another country in the Middle East that was known for the quality of its oranges, mandatory Palestine became a role model for Republican Turkey. The government sent agricultural experts and academics to Palestine to study modern methods there. It purchased orange saplings from Palestine to grow them on home soil. It employed Professor Frederick Simon Bodenheimer, a German-born Jewish entomologist from the Hebrew University of Jerusalem, at the Ankara University for 3 years to teach new methods to fight against agricultural disease. Although the area of land devoted to oranges expanded from 1923 onwards, and the government adopted new methods and technologies of production, the growth of orange production, as we can see from the graph, was neither steady nor constant. One reason was weather conditions, such as rain fluctuations and freezing temperatures. A more serious problem was heavy infestations that limited both yield and quality. The Ministry of Economy, or later National Economy, took measures against mites that fed on oranges. The government bought pestis to spray orange trees to protect them from pests and imported tents to root out disastrous orange disease. Newspapers explained to orange producers how to store and handle agrochemicals. All these efforts enhanced the yield, and 1939 marked the highest point of orange production in Republican or early Republican Turkey. Orange typically had to undergo a series of processes. The crop was ripe in late December or early January. Once fully orange, the fruit was ready to harvest. Packing up was an important part of the process in which workers, generally girls, but also the elderly, labored. The process of selling oranges moved through a series of steps that benefited the middleman the most. Generally speaking, it was them who began to cash in on this fruit's popularity. Such men sought to have a complete monopoly in the marketing of the product, especially in the national markets. The reason why orange took on nationalist and symbolic meanings lie in the political spirit of that time. The Great Depression and the subsequent protectionist policies led to government-backed nationwide campaigns in economic life. Within this increasingly nationalist climate, the Turkish government cemented orange as a national commodity, giving this fruit the cultural and political foothold that it needed in the society. The expansion in the range of local oranges and the dramatic increase in production was advertised as a sign of the success of national economic nationalism. The role of People's House, or Halkevleri in Turkish, which was founded by the government to spread Kemalist reforms among the populace in the glorification of orange as a fruit of the Turkish nation, was particularly important. The Mersin People's House, for example, opened the first orange exhibition in the country to introduce this fruit to the masses in 1934. The People's House in Aydın organized an annual festival of oranges. The one in Izmir published a book in 1937 titled The Orange Hero, or Uncle Mehmet Ali from Balçova. And it was a book on Mehmet Ali, who was a 65 years old orange producer from Balçova, Izmir. The leading figures from the People's House of Izmir and Governor Fazlı Güleç visited him in person to hear his story of orange growing over decades. There were two motivations behind their visit. First, the People's House portrayed him as a model of success for other potential orange growers. Second, the farmer credited the government and its officers in the province with helping him become quite successful in achieving the cultivation of orange. The People's House propagated the government's role through this person, through Mehmet Ali. And as orange was propagated as a national commodity, Mehmet Ali represented the patriotic Turkish villager in this nationalist campaign. The promotion of orange as a new national commodity was not limited to Turkish provinces. The government sought to sell it to foreign countries and actually gave a priority to its export. High-level officials and ministers contact their counterparts in Europe to lessen import restrictions against Turkish orange. Turkish orange sellers still had to tackle a major problem. Turkish oranges were smaller and sourer than their counterparts in the global markets. Moreover, the increase in production notwithstanding, the prices of oranges or Turkish oranges were still higher than other countries in the Mediterranean basin, disabling their export to countries in the region. Turkey could export its oranges only to places where local orange production did not meet the demands. But Turkey failed to penetrate export markets to the extent the political authorities and producers had anticipated. The consumption of oranges changed across geography. It enjoyed moderate popularity where orange trees existed. For other areas, transportation facilities determined the availability of this commodity. Thanks to the economic linking of the country, trains and ships carried commodities and supplied new markets with more fresh fruit. New connections were forged linking consumers and producers across space. Various types of oranges poured into distant markets. Though these transportation facilities helped fuel demand by providing oranges to new provinces and locally produced oranges spread out throughout the country, the practical problems of supplying oranges to remote places or remote provinces led to significant losses in quality and quantity of oranges. Since the bulk of the population lived in the countryside and they had fewer options to obtain high quality and diverse oranges than their urban counterparts. It was hard to find oranges in good condition at provincial grocery stores. With its price levels even higher than in city centers, orange was mostly consumed by local elites and civil servants in villages and towns. Many ordinary folks did not eat oranges simply because they could not afford to. A careful reading of contemporary sources, including press accounts, novels, and stories, suggests that high-quality oranges became a symbol of social status and the indulgence of the rich. For example, wealthy people who could afford to go to theater halls ate oranges while watching plays. Such people had a special fondness for the consumption of oranges on special occasions such as religious feasts and New Year's festivities. People from more humble backgrounds could eat a good quality orange only if their relatives who engage in orange growing privately sent oranges to them. In conclusion, orange became a solid part of the Turkish economy and culture soon after the formation of the Republic in 1923. It had long-standing associations with economic nationalism. Oranges have held specific cultural meanings and spiritual significance in the decades to follow. The government played a decisive role in the encouragement of orange production. By combating disease, minimizing insect damage, and crossbreeding Turkish oranges with foreign varieties, it enabled oranges to ripen on a regular basis in areas where plantations had been marginal in the Ottoman Empire. It actualized the transformation of orange from an import to export commodity. As an undeveloped country, Turkey was able to put an end to dependence on imported oranges in a very short period of time. These developments, however, neither decreased its price significantly nor opened up its consumption to lower classes significantly. Regarding its sale, small producers could not reap the benefits of this profitable crop, while the middlemen derived enormous profits. And considering its consumption, the rich ate fragrant, juicy, and sweet-tasting oranges, whereas poor quality and bitter-flesh oranges were relegated to the poor. All the evidence from various primary sources supports the conclusion that the well-off were far more likely than lower classes to eat oranges throughout the year. Although improvements in transport links provided more people access to a greater variety of oranges, the fruit did not lose its social cachet. Instead, it continued to enjoy its status and often appeared as a cultural reference for wealth. Thank you very much for listening to me.
Thank you, Semih. The way, those are clapping hands. They're not raised hands. Okay, good. I'm never completely sure. So, what we're going to do, we're going to move on to the second presentation, and then I will have some questions and/or comments for both presenters, and then we will open up the discussion for everybody else also. So, Katerina, are you there?
Of course.
Okay, great. Good. We also let me fix your name, which is great. So
Yeah.
let me briefly introduce Katerina Bregianni. She is the director of research at the Modern Greek History Research Center at the Academy of Athens. This is one of the leading research institutions in Greece. She has a very long list of publications regarding Greece's banking sector and Greece's rural economy. I became familiar with Katerina's work when I was a doctoral student, and it was a very inspiring and thought-provoking work that allowed me to create my own path, let's say, for historical research. And it's a pleasure to have her with us today. So, Katerina, whenever you like, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much for inviting me. I have a little problem because I've lost my glasses yesterday, and those are not very the good ones. So I will try to do my performance today in a compatible way. So I will speak about, I differentiate a bit the subject. Sorry, I cannot say, okay. Okay. So I differentiate a bit the subject, as I believe that the Greek case is also incorporated in the general, in the global, let's say, context of the 30s Great Depression, of the late 20s and the 30s Great Depression. So I will examine the case of the grain cultivation in Greece, especially wheat, in comparison to tobacco mostly, and of course the impact whereupon of the Great Depression. First of all, it must be said that according to the League of Nations, the rural crisis was in Europe the evidence of the overall crisis, of the overall financial crisis, and this was described by the decrease of the agricultural products prices, especially in 1931. In the same order of ideas, the agents of the Société des Nations, of the League of Nations, explained the Great Depression And of course, in the first place, the global rural crisis in the augmentation of stock of the stocks in cereals, and especially in wheat globally. And we can remark here that in 1930 it is obviously at 1929 and 1930 there is a bigger stock in wheat globally in comparison to the early 20s. In this overall context, we can integrate the Greek case, as in Greece also. The Great Depression in the first place, had the appearance of a severe rural crisis. But in the same time, in Greece, we had also an internal crisis, as in the middle of the 20s, and especially after 1923, a huge number of refugees came in Greece after especially the Act of Lausanne. It's supposed to be about 1.5 million people. Half of them, the 40% of them were established in rural areas. According to the central banker, Emmanuel Tsouderos, this population was established, this refugee population established in rural areas, were producers of wheat for 76%, of tobacco at 14%, sorry, and 3% of them cultivated vineyards. So with the global, in the same time with the overall of the overall Great Depression, of the global Great Depression, in Greece we have an internal crisis caused to the financial needs in order to establish this population. It must be noted that the rural settlement in Greece of the refugee population was applied mostly by the League of Nations and not by the Greek state, as it was the case for the urban settlement of the refugees, the other 60% of this refugee population. So you can see here in this table, and I have to excuse myself because I didn't have the time to do the translation of this PowerPoint in English, but I suppose that we can understand that, as mostly are numbers. So according to the League of Nations, this population the refugee population established in the north of Greece, in the rural areas, of course, of the north of Greece, were cultivators of wheat and cultivators of tobacco. And according to the archival material that I studied, I saw, I noticed, I remarked an effort from the League of Nations and Nations agents to support both of them, cultivation of wheat and in the same time cultivation of tobacco. So as a consequence of the rural refugee settlement, a series of institutional interventions strengthened state control in the same time with the intervention of the international institutions. So it was created by the state a linear connection between the rationalization of the rationalization of the rural economy, the agrarian reform, and the refugee settlement. Particularly important was intervention in the field of agricultural credit accorded by the Agricultural Bank of Greece, which was founded precisely in 1929. A part of the investments for the foundation of this bank were from the international loan that Greece contracted with under the auspice of the League of Nations. So the monetization of the rural economy in Greece passes from this procedure of the refugee settlement and the consequent foundation of relative economic institutions. So you can see here that before, those are the sums before the creation, according to the agricultural credit, before the foundation of the Agricultural Bank of Greece. And we can see that after 1927, meaning during the process of the refugee settlement, the credits according to agriculture were already expanded. But this procedure, it is, let's say, multiplied after the creation, the foundation of the Bank Agricole of Greece, a bank which now it's not in function. So you can see here the credits allocated to farmers and to the farmers being members of cooperatives. This procedure, it is actually connected with the evolution of cooperative movement in Greece also. And in the official discourse, let's say, it is remarked an intention to proceed to the exercise of agricultural credit via especially rural cooperatives. Nevertheless, this was not a really success story, and the bank continued to allocate credit in individual farmers. I have to add here, because you are seeing the period that I am examining in this table, in this data, that I'm going to proceed in my analysis under dividing the 30s in two periods. One period until 1935, beginning of 36, which is the period of the first Greek Republic, the Republican regime, and for the second period from 1936 to the just before to the Second World War, which is the period of the Metaxas regime. So this is also an indication for the politics applied by the Bank of Greece, by the Bank Agricole of Greece, the Agricultural Bank of Greece, describing the amounts accorded under rural collateral. And we have here more precise details, the credits allocated with collateral of its specific product. So in addition to the Agricultural Bank of Greece, other institutions, national institutions, were created during this period in order to support agricultural domain, and they express, of course, the politics of agriculture, the protection of protecting agriculture. First of all, we can refer to the Autonomous Resin Organization, which was founded in 1925. The Central Committee of Domestic White Production, the Cotton Organization, and of course, the Autonomous Organization of the Hellenic Tobacco. It must be said that the priorities of financial central policies also set the objectives of interventions in agricultural production. Consequently, state interventions were mainly limited, as we're going to see, to wheat, cotton, tobacco, and resins, products that they were commercialized, of course, and that they significantly affected the balance of payments. Despite these goals of development, of agricultural development, the interventionist policy of the state was mainly focused on the quantitative increase of arable land and not on the increase of the production itself. Despite the extensive state intervention in the rural area during the years under examination, from the late 20s to 1935, the agrarian change of the countrysides had nevertheless significant limits. So this is the general schema, let's say, and in this schema, the Great Depression created new conditions for the Greek agriculture in terms of value, as we can observe an important decrease in value, also a decrease in the production's volume, and the peak, it must be said, of the rural crisis in Greece, globally, but also in Greece, were the years 1930, 1931, and 1932. And here we have some indicators about concerning the rural production precisely during this period. I have to say that this protocol of creating indicators in Greece is copying, of course, the protocols, the statistical protocols of the League of Nations, where when in that time the globalization, let's say, of statistical standards was intending to create homogenic series for the European states. So we can observe here the increase in terms of value. And in the next table, we can also observe the increase in terms of rural products prices concerning as regards exportation. In the same time, we have important, for some products, important increase of their value, of their prices in local market. Especially this affects, I think, tobacco, not so much or not at all wheat production. And on the contrary, the resins are gaining high prices in local markets. And I suppose, I thought about that today because of Juan's invitation to participate in the seminar. Perhaps the important taxes put in the grape production in the early 30s are connected to the augmentation of the price of the resin prices in local markets, because we know that in the early 30s, a severe legislation set up a strong, important taxation for the cultivators of resins, provoking a series of riots in the Greek rural areas where the grape were cultivated. In the same time, we can observe in this table the indicators concerning the expansion of the cultivated lands during precisely this Republican, let's say, period. And it is rather easy to see that it was an effort to expand the cultivated land. This was gained also because of the public works in Macedonia, in Greek Macedonia, financed by the Second International Loan of 1928. In the same time, it is here we have some indication, some data on the production of the rural production during the same period. We can easily remark that the production of wheat is more than double, and in the same time, the other products are whether stable or they have also they gain also important augmentation in terms of the volume of agriculture production. In this, let's say that in this general context, the protectionist policies of the Greek state were applied mainly on the culture of wheat, as already said. This is the case also for the Republican period, but in the same time for the period of the dictatorship. The question of wheat, it attracts the state's intervention as a product that occupies a central place in the rural economy, but also as it is actually connected to the feeding of the nation, and especially the feeding of the urban lower social strata. And here in this table, we can remark that the weight curve we have already seen here. Yes, the augmentation of the production of wheat, which is about more than 50% of the total cereal crops during this period. And while it was less than 28% for the years 1928 to 1935. And in the second place, we can observe that protectionist policy seems to have positive results in 1935, according to the protection precisely of wheat, since at that time the increase in the production of the wheat production was greater than the extension of the cultivated land. This means that we have an improvement in the yield per hectare, which was the result of centralized efforts in order to modernize agriculture through new cultivation methods, but also through the use of fertilizers. In general terms, cereals reflect the most considerable attempt of the state objecting to agricultural growth. As a conclusion, we note that the trend toward autarcy in wheat does not overturn the correlation between cereal production of cereals and the commercialized products, which was actually from the first place the attempt undertaken during the agrarian reform and during the rural settlement of the refugees, meaning creating a multiform, polyvalent agriculture, being in the same time autoconsummation and in the same time integrated in the market. So during the period under examination, as I said already, we have a positive evolution concerning the yields per hectare of the cereal crops. Generally, their movement evokes an important progression. Contrary to the unfavorable years 1929 to 1931, where yields indicated a weakening, this tension stabilized from 1933 onwards. Nevertheless, the augmentation of the production, of the wheat production, or in general of the cereal production, and especially the production of the culture of wheat, was considered as a success story, let's say, of the rural economy of the period, of the Greek rural economy of the period, and of course of the Greek agricultural central policy. The fact of stimulated wheat evokes, as I said already, a political decision realized through measure of, I believe, of a conventional nature. The most important among them was the concentration of the product since 1927. This measure embodies a vast intervention of the state, which is inscribed in its quasi-recent role of, let's say, directing or protecting, or better protecting the country's overall economy, and also includes the question already said of feeding urban population. The Central Commission for the Protection of Wheat was responsible for concentrating the quantities of the product, which surpassed the food needs of the agricultural population. The committee buying them from their cultivators at a profitable price. And we can observe in this very simplifying table that in 1935, the concentration of the product and of course 1933, those years, the concentration of wheat was rather important by this state's institution. It must be said that the Commission for the Protection of Wheat, KEPES, assured also high prices for the wheat cultivators. During the period under examination, meaning until 1935, the price of buying wheat from its cultivators remained visibly higher than the import price of the product. Of course, this was associated with the measures applied in the international trade of Greece. And on the other hand, the protection of the internal production of wheat is carried out by its artificially high price in favor of the cultivators, but not in favor of the consummators. So in conclusion, until this period to conclude about what happens until 1935 in Greece, we noticed that the depression worsened the situation in the Greek countryside, but it seems that the primary sector could react to changes happening in the global economic sphere. The transformation of agriculture on the influence of the crisis shows that there was a political will, let's say, to stimulate rural production, which was considered as a factor of national wealth. The planning thus of the Greek agrarian policy adapts itself in the middle of the crisis in these new conditions. Within this negative conjuncture, the economic crisis is closely linked to the general ideological context, itself being evoked by political intentions and the political programs of the liberal governments. Let's summarize that and say that we are, from the ideological point of view, in a process of constructing and deconstructing the rural space. So I don't know if we have more time or...
So if you can summarize.
Okay. So I will summarize with a reference to the dictatorial, to the period of dictatorship, demonstrating you precisely the credits allocated on agricultural collateral during this period of Metaxas regime. We can observe, and I am examining that as a way to protect specific products. We can see that the wheat and the other cereals, of course, absorb the bigger amount of these credits, on the contrary of the tobacco, which shows the credits accorded to its cultivators in degrees. This is only some data in order to demonstrate how the Agricultural Bank adapts its objectives to the objectives actually of the agrarian policy, of the dictatorship's agrarian policy. It is known that, like Mussolini's Italy, Metaxas in Greece, target, at least as concerns the political discourse, illiteracy in cereals, and mostly illiteracy in wheat. It was a rather problematic policy, as this evolution concerning the increase of the prices of consummation prices continues during that period, and an important inflation hits, let's say, the living standards of urban, but also of rural population. Okay, I will not speak more about the overall policy of the Metaxas regime, but I have to point out, as a conclusion, let's say, that during this period, during the period of the dictatorship, we can remark a passage from intensive protectionism of the previous period to economic nationalism, if I may say that. So maybe during the discussion we will have the opportunity to speak more about the period of Metaxas, as his rural policy is rather indicative for the character of the Greek Greek interwar dictatorship, which has an important philo-agraire profile. A profile of a populist and rural, I don't know if we can say that, ruralist profile. So thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you, Katerina. So I have a couple questions for each one of you. I will not ask all the questions now. I will email some of them later, so that other people can also intervene. Semih, I was thinking about, it's very interesting how you show that this development of orange production and this increase in the trade of oranges is experienced very differently by different, let's say, different sections of the Turkish society. For example, producers of oranges cannot enjoy as high profits as the middlemen, the commercial middlemen, and so on. So they don't benefit as much. But I was thinking, if comparing these orange producers to the producers of other agricultural commodities in Turkey, could sort of tell us a bit of a different story, a more optimistic or maybe even more pessimistic story about how this development affected agricultural producers. Also, I found it very interesting that in your paper you make reference to a children's theater play recommending orange consumption because it rejuvenates body and mind. The interwar period, we know there. I have read about other commodities in other places. For example, this is a time when in Sweden, drinking milk is promoted among children. It is part of a broader story of not only of the economy, developing this specific production, but also that it is. It reflects new concerns about health, about childhood, and I was wondering if this is a time in Turkey where either health or children or diet more generally becomes important in any way. Of course, this can go to extremes in the 30s in places like Nazi Germany, right? But it's not only a story from there. So children, family, health, and last, I wanted to ask you about storage. You make a very interesting case about technical progress or technical infrastructural development in transportation. This seems to be a drive or an important factor here. how about storage? You make reference to some problems that sometimes the oranges will rot away and so on. We know that in the 50s, 60s, electrification and refrigeration sort of solved this issue in many parts of the world. Is there any attempt to fix this problem of storage with oranges? And then Katerina, about your presentation. I was very interested in this notion of autarky at the level of the family, or looking at the internal consumption in Greece. I know from my research on tobacco that let's say agricultural modernizers in Greece were interested in tobacco producers growing other things in addition to tobacco.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Some fruit, some
Yes,
garlic,
yes.
some onions, some chickens.
Yeah.
Now, much of that often does not appear in the official statistics, but it was considered a good thing anyway, either for the consumption of the family or selling in local markets to increase the income. Now, tobacco, of course, is a different story from wheat, because tobacco was in an overproduction crisis, whereas wheat was something that, let's say, the modernizers wanted Greece to produce more of. Now, was this sort of multi-use, this mixed crop use, or this sort of invisible statistics of what the family produces for itself or for local markets, considered something good in the case of wheat producers? Was it considered something that should be avoided so that wheat can be produced more efficiently? So yeah, that's about self-consumption in wheat production. So maybe Semih, you can take it from there.
Thank you for the questions and comments. Like for the first one, for the other commodities in Turkey and the role.
Sorry, Semih, can you speak a bit louder or closer
Sorry.
to the mic?
I always forget. For the first one, for orange producers and the role of middlemen and other commodities, I can say that for other popular or national commodities, we can see like state monopoly, and if we have state monopoly, then the role of middlemen naturally decreases. But for other products, popular products, or like these nationalized products, I need to just check, because as I know, like for some of them we have like more cooperatives, more trade kind of, not trade unions but producers unions. So it will be great to integrate this point when I revise it. For the second one, that's a very good point actually, the children's health and the role of theater, or they try to promote this healthy consumption. And you can see a similar things like in Turkey, similar to Sweden or many other countries in the interwar period, especially in the 1930s. And actually not only nutrition but also sports and other physical activities were highly encouraged by the state for healthy generations. Actually, Yiğit Akın, he has a good book based on his master's thesis, but the book is in Turkish. He deals with this role of sports and creating healthy, strong nations. And of course, you can see as inspirations from other authoritarian countries in this period. But of course, this health or undernutrition was an important point for the government's agenda regarding the future of the country. For the third one, storage was a particularly problem where they produce orange. Why? Because these regions had warm climate, so it was not easy to just keep them for a long period of time. But when they sent their products to big cities, especially to Istanbul, although still limited, they had certain storages in faraway locations, or they had they can use ice, or they can collaborate with ice company and to keep them or to prevent the fruits from decaying, I would say. And it's another serious problem, because when you spend so much time on storage, and when you just limited amount of fresh fruit outside the season, then it contributes this social effect of the consumption of this fruit. And actually, I need to just stress this point: how the storage conditions or how the limited opportunities contribute to the social aspect of this story. Thank you so much for the comments.
Yeah, thank you. Katerina, please go ahead. You're muted, Katerina.
Sorry. Thank you for the comments and for the question, which is, I think, this is the most important element as concerned the evolution of the Greek rural economy during this period. I believe that this multifarious
Multifaceted.
Character is predominant during the whole period, and we can see that also from the reports of the Link of Nations, the official reports of the Link of Nations, and we can see that also from the reports of the agronomes in the local inquiries that they are practicing during the 30s. On the other hand, I think that the percentage of this culture, meaning culture of products for the house, it is visible in the statistics, because we have during the crisis years, maybe not the statistics in the statistical yearbook of the Greek state, but in the statistics of the Agricultural Bank of Greece, because there is a difference between the two. These two statistical sources on statistical data. I remarked that during the period of the years of the severe crisis, meaning 1931, 1932, and 1933, there is an important augmentation in livestock, which is registered, statistically registered, and also an important increase in the culture of fruits and tomatoes and products for the house, or maybe, as you said, for the local market. And we know that also from the oral history, that during the 30s we have production. Its house, its rural family was a productive enterprise, if we can say that, producing commodities for the local market if they had a surplus compared to the consumption of the family itself. But my impression is that in the statistics of the Agricultural Bank, we can observe this tension, and also we can observe that, as I said, in the reports of the agronomists during this period. But on the other, additionally, my idea is that the institutions, international and national, were in favor of this type of agriculture, even if sometimes in the official discourse we have the opposite, meaning an effort to promote monoculture. But this, I think that it was only a matter of of political discourse, I think. We have, we know maybe it is a detail, it's not a detail. It is important to say that the reports of the Agricultural Bank, the official reports, the annual reports, refer to food scarcity in rural areas during mostly 31, 32, 33. So they were favor to the production of goods for the family in order to survive.
All right. Thank you, Katerina.
Thank you.
So it's the time for anybody else who might want to ask a question or make a comment. You can feel free to either open your microphone or type anything on the chat. Halian Chen, hello, please go ahead.
Okay, thank you very much for this two wonderful presentations. And one question I think is related to the orange about the national icon or something like that, because I'm not working on the period about 1920s, 30s, and so on. And as for me, in the Chinese context, there's also the kind of national boycott of some from other foreign products and so on. So when you use the term for a kind of national commodity, was there any kind of political protest against the foreign products? Like in the orange case, there's some competitors in the market in Turkey, or for which kind of, in general, for the trade and so on. So it was that part of the factor influence that to maybe promote it as orange as a national product and so on. And so on. And also for the second presentation, I think I really, it's quite fascinating to see a lot of tables and so on. I just wonder, it's from the process of the data, like for the French bank and so on, they get the data. How is the procedure to the report system? They collect the data about the production and the price and so on. Probably there should be some agencies. They report their maybe the product output, or there's some kind of custom. They control their taxation was whatever, something like that. I just wonder about the kind of archive perspective or the data processing in that context and so on. That's quite interesting. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you, Helen. Semih, maybe you can take it from there.
Thank you for the question. When we look at the boycotts in modern Turkey, we can see, examples from the late Ottoman Empire, and first against the Kingdom of Greece, or like later against Austria, or later on against Ottoman Greeks themselves. And but in Republican period, this economic nationalism, although they were against foreign goods, there was no particular targets, especially when it came to oranges. Why? Because when we look at the from who Turkey imported orange, we can see mandatory Palestine, and as we can see, they're trying to transfer knowledge from mandatory Palestine. Or we can look at other sellers such as Cyprus or Greece. And back then, or especially in the 1930s, Turkey tried to have good relations with Great Britain. So Cyprus was not a problem. They could not easily target Cyprus. And when it came to Greece, actually in the 1930s, both countries had really good relations. It was sort of golden age of Turkish-Greek relations. So actually they were trying to collaborate on different products, including tobacco, against Western competition. So although there was a economic nationalism, it was not like China against certain products or certain Western products, or just aiming an individual country or different countries. But I need to think about this point. I need to find, more stuff about it. It may be the case, like they may say that we don't want, orange from this country. We want our own country. But usually the differentiation of the local and foreign was more abstract instead of just naming a particular, nation or particular place. But thank you so much for the question.
Thank you, Semih. Katerina, please feel free.
Thank you. Thank you for the question. Indeed, it was a rather interesting to collect this data. It was rather interesting to collect this data as I tried to combine the international data from the statistical yearbook of the Link of Nations, the annual statistical yearbooks for Greece, and in the same time statistical data from the Greek statistical yearbook of the 30s, late 20s and 30s. Most of them, though, thus are from collected from the archives of the Bank Agricole of Greece and from the annual reports of the Bank Agricole of Greece and Agricultural Bank of Greece. I use the French term. And for this reason, they are so detailed concerning the protection of specific products. But I tried to combine the international, the data of the international institutions, which were, of course, collected via the Greek institutions, to the national data themselves. So it was a rather interesting procedure. We have to say, thank you for underlying that. We have to say that during this period, the late 20s and the 30s, globally it is applied by the Link of Nations, a sort of modelization on formatting statistical series, and this was, of course, in the intention to create and integrated and liberal, of course, market. So we have standard methods for each nation state, for Greece, etc. And we can observe that via the data for the Balkan states, meaning that these indicators that I demonstrate, those are methods of the League of Nations Statistical Committee, applied by the nation states afterwards. Maybe if I have the time, only to add that in the occasion of the Great Depression in Greece, it was created another financial or advising body, which was the Supreme Economic Council, and this body, this administrative body, was authorized by the government to elaborate the data, the statistical data of its institution, of its economic institution in Greece. So there is this procedure. But that I demonstrate today, it is okay, the simplifying, it was under a simplifying processing. We have, with my team, we have proceeded new elaboration in the framework of a research project I direct on the Great Depression. So, but I demonstrate the most, the already published, let's say. So thank you for the question.
Thank you, Katerina. Anybody else might want to intervene? Evelina Masheva, hello, welcome. Please go ahead.
Hello, thank you for both presentation. I enjoyed it very much. My question is to Katerina regarding the international aspects of the processes she outlined, particularly if she thinks that the stimulating wheat was more of self-reliance economically and being more independent, whereas stimulating tobacco as a more international commodity that was, as Juan Zabala's dissertation shows, leading to a dependence and ties with Germany, economic dependency. And also because I'm starting my work on tobacco labor in Bulgaria, it was also a very radical, especially the processing sector. It was a strong communist influence, so it was also stimulating tobacco was kind of stimulating this very radical labor movement that was present there. And yes, thank you.
Thank you for your question, and I wish you a good, a nice continuation to your work on Bulgaria. I think that during the parliamentary period, they tried to do both, meaning support wheat production for the internal market, and in the same time support tobacco culture, for the international market, and especially the trade with Germany. But under the influence of the Great Depression, this differentiates a bit, not generally. Tobacco, as the research of Juan demonstrates very well, inserts to the international trade structures via the bilateral commercial agreements. So they keep this economic activity, but in the same time, they try to support wheat production for internal market in order to gain, let's say, some balance in the balance of payments. But the big change is during the dictatorship, when Metaxas accentuates the policy of autarky in wheat. In the same time, the Greek ruralists had a big debate, public debate, of course, in the question precisely about the possibility of the country to be autosufficient in agricultural products, and especially in wheat. And the common result was, of course, that Greece can never be independent in those in cereals, and especially in wheat. In the same time, it is an ideological challenge of the period, as all the authoritarian regimes or totalitarian regimes of the late 30s underline the autosufficiency of the nation, and they adopt economic nationalism. And I believe the influence, the German, the Nazi influence, the Nazi influence in matter of the economic thought during the Metaxas regime was rather important, even if politically or in matter of geopolitical position, Greece were still in the British sphere of influence. But all the agents or the actors, let's say, of the dictatorship were influenced by economic nationalism of Germany during that period. For this reason also, they accentuated the concept of autarcy precisely in which was, of course, very connected with the feeding of the urban lower social strata in the same time. I don't know if I explain here. I respond to your question, but in my opinion, there are both economic and ideological reasons, and there is also this radical influence on the, as Juan also explores, concerning the cultivators of tobacco. In Greece, during this period, we have important riots and strikes, etc., in the domain of tobacco cultivation. So thank you for the question.
Thank you, Katerina. Unless anybody wants to say anything else, use the hand emoji or type anything. I think this, after we can keep it exactly at 1.5 hours. I think it's a nice duration for today's panel. Thanks everybody. Thanks Semih, thanks Katerina and Evelina and Helian for your questions, and everybody else for being with us today. In the second to last panel, you will receive shortly the links for the last one, where we will have Haley and Chen, among others, presenting their work. So have a nice rest of the evening or day for Semih, who's in California. And thanks everybody. Take care.